Howdy fellow creators, and welcome back to another video. And in today's video I am here to ask you one question, that being, how do these work? But more importantly, how do we make explosives and edible drinks and food with just cotton? Well, to find that out, we're gonna have to dig deep. So let's bring out Larry. Everyone say hi to Larry here.
Hi, Larry.
Larry is basically here to tell us what is inside a Yeep and how exactly do we work. Now, to answer this question, we're gonna have to start at the surface with this. Obviously, we know what this is. It's a pillow, it's got the stuffing inside, and it has the fabric on the outside. It makes sense, it makes sense. But this, however, does not. This is also made out of cotton, with the fabric on the outside, yet it's bouncy. How could fabric bounce? This can actually be easily answered with just one simple answer. Rubber. So with rubber, all we have to do is just replace the fabric with rubber, remove some of the stuffing, but still make it strong, and it's a trampoline. Still works. So, we're gonna have to dig deeper. That being the impulse and the explosive bomb. They both look the exact same, but they're actually kind of very different. One destroys pillows, while the other one doesn't. If they're both made of stuffing, how would this work? This can also be solved quite easily, considering that we already know that it has rubber, so the silicone section right here would be the rubber. But it starts to get quite complicated once you see this right here. Is that wool or wood? I believe that it's wood, because if you look carefully, you can see that there's no wool indents or whatever, so it's not stitched together. Unlike this right here, which is obviously made with fabric and cotton. But how? How can it be made of cotton and yet still do a shockwave and explosion? I've also figured this out. You see, if rubber goes at a high enough speed, it can actually burn cotton. And if one happened to be more flammable than the other one, then you would do an explosion rather than a shockwave. And before you think that the weapon and the grapplers are difficult to make, it's actually quite not. You see, all this is just a cotton outer layer. As you can see right here, it has indents, it has stitches and everything. Even the pellets. Those are made out of cotton, but just shot really fast. Meanwhile, for the grappler, it's kind of the same as the bomb actually. You see, this right here is the rubber, the silicone, which makes it a suction. And then there's a button right here, which I can assume is made out of rayon and rubber, I guess. And then this right here is wool. So obviously you can do this. It makes sense. What doesn't make sense though is this. These are both 400 stuffing, yet this one makes you bounce, and this one makes you heavier. How does that work? Well, it all has to do with how you place the cotton. You see this right here, it has a stitch, so it's obviously made out of cotton or fabric or whatever. So, as long as you put barely any cotton, then that gives it enough to give it a bounce, you know? But still being sturdy enough for you to wear it. Meanwhile, for this, it's much smaller than this right here. If you look at the size difference, you can tell that they're obviously packing the same amount of cotton, but it's tighter, it's smaller, it's heavier. So that's why these have different volume, yet it has the same amount of cotton. Things that are even stranger though, are these right here. How is it able to duplicate itself and be edible? So let's figure that out. So a fun little fact is that if you have 100% cotton for your clothing or anything, it's actually compostable. So most likely this soil right here is probably cotton, 100%. This pot is cotton. My only guess for this plant right here is that it's an actual seed, not just pillows. Although I don't know how in the world it makes pillows when it grows. Have you all even noticed that? It's actual little pillows. Fun little fact, I guess. But the most complicated thing by far has to be this. How in the world do you create life using stuffing? Well, actually, you don't. If you look at how much stuffing it costs 0. So, shockingly enough, although it has the seams and it looks like it's made out of cotton, it's actually made of no cotton at all. It's literally 0. You can check on your pet yourself. It is 0 cotton. But a lot of things can make sense while using these 3 ingredients, like the frisbee, most likely just made out of rubber and rayon, you know? And the brush, and maybe the comb too, is just made of pure cotton and fabric. And it also explains things like the VR headset and camera. So I believe that the VR headset, this bomb, and this hider detector are made of the 3 same things. Number 1, if you look at this right here, you can obviously tell that it looks like a wireless transmitter, as seen right here. And although you don't see it in these 2, I believe they work the same way. Because for the VR headset, all it needs to do is just connect to the camera. This might be a wireless receiver, considering that the button is the exact same as the VR headset. The only thing that confuses me a little bit is this right here, but I believe it still works. Considering that it has this red, which is very similar to this red from the transmitter, same with this as well. I believe that it's a little bit of wireless redstone in our cotton creations. It's crazy. And if you're confused about the butt joe right here, you can see that right here, it's got strings, which are made of wool, obviously. So, this still can make sense without it having to be complicated. By the way, just to be clear, I'm not going to be talking about seasonal or bundle things because then we'd be using stuff like this. And we're not going to be talking about these either, since these are only here for a limited amount of time. Back to the intro of the video. These voice decoys right here, although we used to think that they are quite complicated to make, we now know that this is wood, this is rubber, and this is fabric, or rayon, which is usually made for clothing and stuff like that. So it makes sense that they would use rayon for this build right here. Now, using the knowledge we've gathered today, we can now see what Larry would look like using our knowledge. It doesn't really look like how you'd expect, but I have a theory on that. You see, when we first sat out the game, I assumed that we're gonna look like this. We're full of stuffing, we only place down cotton stuff, you know, the basics. But as we progress, we start to get more butt coins and more items, which means it leads to more complex creations. So that way, you get stuff like this and this, but that's all gonna be added to your Yeep. So if you get paints, if you get creative stuff, if you even get stuff like bombs, and the Yeep you used to be is very far than what you are now. You're constantly progressing, growing up, getting new things, and your thoughts and builds went from simplistic to complex. So that's why I believe every new Yeep starts out as just fabric and cotton. But the more we play, the more we learn, the more we grow, we turn it to this. That's my theory anyways. So, with the knowledge that we've gained today, I want you to leave in the comments, how in the world do these work? Goodbye! Oh, and also watch these videos right here.